we're good to go. So let me get started with everything as other participants join, and I'm just gonna get started with the presentation. All right, so hold on one second. So hello everyone. Thank you all for. You can't hear me now? Right, but we can't hear Esprene. Oh, it's supposed to start until 3:35.
Sharon, I hear you loud and clear. Sharon, can you say something? Make sure I still hear you.
I don't think they're hearing us. I'm gonna come back in.
Sharon, can you hear me? Thurman?
Can someone say something? We don't think we hear you.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
I'm talking. Brian and Miss Sharon are muted. Green's back.
All right, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Can you hear all of us?
I can hear you. E.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
All right. So we still have some 2 minutes remaining, so we can.
I was starting to sweat bullets. I was like,
3 minutes.
They're going to be glitches. Like, I mean, we've been doing this long enough, like 2 years now in these little boxes. Like, they're going to be glitches. So,
Yeah, we got it resolved.
Things will go wrong, but we'll work it out.
All right.
Thurman, could you say that again?
Can you hear me? Oh my gosh.
We can't hear anybody.
Huh.
Can you hear me, Miss Sharon?
Yes, we can hear you now. We couldn't hear Thurman.
Bryant and Miss Sharon, can you hear me? No. E, can you hear me?
I can. Yep.
Esprene?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right.
You can't hear Thurman.
We can't hear Thurman or E.
Well, we are a little early. I mean, we're not supposed to start this session until 3:35. I'm wondering if that has something to do with the issues. I don't know. I'm not a tech person. I'm guessing. No, that doesn't have. Okay. Well, apparently that has nothing to do with it. So let's hold up until 3:35, which is like 2 minutes.
Okay, go ahead. Can you hear us? Okay. We can't hear y'all.
Should we log out and log in?
Yeah. So the audience can hear us. We can't hear each other, which is kind of important.
Miss Sharon and Bryant, can you log back out quickly and then log back in, just so that you can refresh, maybe?
Okay.
We can hear you. We can hear you. We can see you on our end.
Yeah.
Thurman, say something.
Hello?
Hello.
Hi.
I can hear you, Miss Sharon.
Yeah, Esprene.
Yeah.
Okay, we hear E now. Thurman, can we hear you?
We got to figure it out. We can hear
Yes.
Well, we have no idea how this is going to go now.
Oh, okay.
So Thurman, you can't hear us?
Yes, I can hear everybody, but Miss Sharon and Bryant can't hear me.
They can't hear you?
I can hear everybody.
How about we do this? The audience, I'm assuming the audience can hear me, right? Yes. Everyone in the audience should be, if everyone can hear me in the audience, can someone just say yes? All right, Mike says yes, yes, yes. Okay.
The audience apparently can hear everybody.
All right, so let's do this.
Yeah.
How about I start the presentation, and then when we get to like the conversation, Thurman, of course, you're moderating that conversation, so we can navigate that. If I don't hear Ms. Sharon, I'm confident you could navigate the conversation without me hearing Ms. Sharon and Bryant, right? All right, so let me.
But the issue is Ms.
What?
Sharon and Bryant can't hear me.
They can't hear you?
No,
Oh.
so it's a little difficult to moderate. Look, get started.
He's on mute. We can't hear him.
Or can we try calling Ms. Sharon and Brian on the phone when we get to that section and see if we can feed the audio through the phone? Something like that?
Look, we got a suggestion that works. So whatever questions I have for Ms. Sharon and Bryant, maybe somebody just repeats the question to them, right?
I can do
Okay.
that.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but just, just work
Miss
it out.
Sharon and Brian, you can hear me, right? I see y'all are muted right now. Unmute and you can hear me, so I can repeat Thurman's question. No, I don't think they can hear. Turn on closed captioning. Oh, someone is thinking out there in the crowd.
Mhm.
Does that work? Oh, someone said it's off.
Yeah, you can click it on.
Okay.
That's off.
Thank you. We have NCSD people on, ready to support whenever we can give our presentation despite our tech problems. Thanks for your patience, y'all.
All right, I'm just gonna shuffle things around on my screen and I'm gonna get started in just a minute.
Okay.
All right. Just so I can hear and see everyone. All right. Share screen. Okay. All right. So, hi, everyone. Thank you very much for your patience as we try to troubleshoot some of the tech issues. Thanks to IT and everyone trying to help us to figure this out. I trust that this will be a meaningful discussion that we'll have with the NCST team. And I'm looking forward to presenting the research findings and then eventually having an open discussion. So as I go through the presentation, feel free to input your questions into the chat box. I am going to try my best to pay attention to those, but even after the conversation, we'll have a moderator who will help to guide and facilitate the conversation. So hello, everyone. I want to just quickly start by introducing myself to the audience so that everyone in the audience can have a bit more have some more insight into who I am and how I approached this work and how I became, what approaches I've utilized in this research study. I am Esprene Liddell-Quintyn. I work at the New Jersey Gun Violence Research Center as a postdoctoral fellow. And I design and lead research studies on gun violence. And I come to this work as a community psychologist, which essentially means that I believe that individuals cannot be well and healthy unless our systems are well and healthy. I also identify as a community engaged scholar. My specific research interest examines the intersection of intimate partner violence and firearms. My current research interests or studies focus on gun violence with that broader emphasis on interpersonal violence. Now, my work is grounded in a deep commitment to engage in collaborative work, where I partner with community organizations to engage community members in different aspects of my research projects. In my research, I am very mindful about not conducting helicopter research, which focuses on going into communities, harvesting their knowledge and resources, and then leaving the communities to return to institutions to publish those research findings for career development. For this research study I'm about to discuss, I utilized a community-based research study approach, and where we collectively at Rutgers New Jersey Gun Violence Research Center partnered with the Newark Community Street team. And we did so to understand the lived experiences of illicit firearm owners. With the support of the Newark Community Street team, we were able to recruit 35 participants. And some of those participants in the study self-identified as illicit firearm owners, while other participants self-identified as having access to an illicit firearm. Now, although those individuals, although we recruited or we included those individuals with access to an illicit firearm, this presentation will only focus on that subsample of individuals who were illicit firearm owners, so that I can share some more perspective on their storage practices as firearm owners and some other topics that we outlined and that I'm going to touch on later on. We recruited individuals between the ages of 18 to 64 years of age, and all of those participants were compensated for their time and commitment for participating in the research study. This study could not be possible without the support from our NCSC co-researchers, whom you see on the screen, Ms. Sharon and Bryant Neal, who are both CT certified and received training to conduct interviews and interviews with participants. And it was important for us to ensure that the community research, the Newark Community Street team members were in the room with the participants, because if it's important for that participant interviewer congruence, and both Ms. Sharon and Bryant are members of the community, and we wanted to ensure that those members of the community, such as Ms. Bryant and Sharon, can build that trust with community members and be able to ensure that there's that rapport that's built in the room, so that the interviewers felt comfortable discussing a very hard and sensitive topic, which is illicit firearm ownership. So Ms. Sharon and Brian, we were both trained to ensure and make sure participants were grounded and okay during the interviews and wanted to continue. And one of the things that we emphasized with all of the interviews is that participants can stop at any time, and they weren't mandated to participate in the study. Our NCSD co-researchers, as I mentioned, conducted interviews. They were also, Sharon and Bryant also assisted with analyzing the data along with my research team of interns. And I want to ensure that we uplift and acknowledge the members of the research team, Ms. Sharon and Bryant. So after this presentation, we're going to hold space for Ms. Sharon and Bryant to really talk about their experiences as co-researchers, and we're going to hear some more about their perspective being a part of this collaboration as we worked on conducting this study.
Mm-hmm.
As you can imagine, these were not easy interviews, and I cannot emphasize how appreciative I am for Ms. Sharon and Brian for skillfully navigating the interviews with the participants as we worked on worked on understanding the range of experiences, lived experiences of illicit firearm owners who shared their stories with us on the variety of topics that are mentioned here. And so just so that we can really garner the essence and the range of experiences of illicit firearm owners. So as we worked through the data and even as I sat and I reflected on some of the data, one of the things that I realized that participants talked about, one particular participant in particular, mentioned and captured the experience of illicit firearm ownership as this is just life. So I want to spend the next 30 minutes or so, because I want to hold space for some conversations, to kind of deconstruct this statement, which was uplifted by one of the participants in our study. Now, one of the things that we noticed in the study is that participants overwhelmingly talked about the role of trauma in influencing their decision to acquire an illicit firearm. And I do remember this, when we were going through the interviews, we started hearing about trauma, and we kind of revisited some of the interview questions. And Ms. Sharon had mentioned to us, we need to talk some more, ask them more about trauma and the questions surrounding trauma because of those original interviews that we asked. So when we gathered that data from participants, the participants essentially described being a past victim of trauma, included being a past victim of gun violence. Participants also described trauma as losing loved ones to gun violence, losing a sibling, a family member to gun violence, and really growing up in a community from a young age, witnessing gun violence within the community, and actually seeing individuals get shot and killed, and that traumatized many participants, to the extent where participants became very hyper vigilant and concerned about being the next or becoming the next victim of gun violence. One participant described their experience with gun violence and trauma as remaining in a state of war. And that participant described the community violence. They believed the community violence that they were witnessing within the community is a manifestation of the pain the community has experienced over time, which in turn, as you can imagine, perpetuates into that intergenerational trauma and continues to contribute to a cycle of violence, as we see different forms of trauma even emerging, and complex trauma eventually contributing to the cycle of violence. Now, some of this trauma lends itself to participants expressing that they were ruminating on thoughts, and those thoughts included thinking that someone would eventually hurt them, or participants perceiving that their lives were in danger at any point in time. So to avoid or prepare for the potential danger or harm that might come their way, participants decided to acquire an illicit firearm out of the concerns, again, that they could potentially be threatened or assaulted by someone. And essentially, participants wanted to also acquire an illicit firearm so that they can protect their loved ones and themselves. And participants really also talked about acquiring a firearm for self-defense. And there were a few participants who mentioned a specific form of threat, and that is domestic violence. Some participants acquired their illicit firearms so that they could protect themselves from a past or a current domestic violence or intimate partner violence abuser. So we see this need to acquire an illicit firearm for these variety of reasons, including also participants talking about having possessions and material possessions and wanting to at least have an illicit firearm so that they could protect themselves from other persons who might want to acquire their material possessions. Now, there was one particular participant who actually talked about being actually saddened by seeing or witnessing the lack of resources in the community and not having sufficient resources to own land or own property within their community. So it was quite interesting to see that participant described acquiring an illicit firearm brought about this sense of ownership and power that they were unable to acquire because of not being able to acquire those resources within their communities, but seeing other folks come into the communities and are able to achieve these positions, attain these possessions. So there were also concerns where participants described living in a crazy world and described this world being so crazy that it encouraged them to protect themselves from instances of racism, possibly encountering instances of racism, and even protecting themselves against potential mass shootings that we all unfortunately are aware of and we see occurring within the US. So participants also discussed this sense of justifying acquiring an illicit firearm because there was this collective sense that everyone in the community or many people in the community also owned an illicit firearm. So this also shaped the decision to also acquire an illicit firearm because of this collective sense of community firearm ownership. Participants were generally aware of, yes, how common it is to actually own a firearm, and within the community, and some participants, not all participants, described acquiring and justifying acquiring an illicit firearm as a visual threat to signal to someone to back off and to not come their way. We also wanted to find out, if suicidal thoughts was also a justification for participants acquiring firearms. And the majority of participants reported that suicidal thoughts did not prompt firearm purchase. So that's an area for some more exploration. And there's also one participant in particular discussed having suicidal thoughts. However, while they were incarcerated and during the point in which they were incarcerated, those suicidal thoughts came on because they had lost a family member while they were incarcerated. When we asked participants about how their peers shaped their decision to own a firearm, the data did not suggest that a peer's decision to own a firearm influenced another person owning a firearm. Instead, participants overwhelmingly emphasized this losing a loved one to gun violence, and that could have been a peer. They've lost a peer to gun violence, and there was a sense that they needed a firearm to protect themselves out of the concern of not knowing whether or not they will make it back home, similar to a peer who they have potentially lost to gun violence. even when we had discussions with participants about, the influence of other external factors, such as television, some participants talked about, television and entertainment also influencing that decision to acquire a firearm because of the presence and the power of actually acquiring a firearm that they've seen on television. They also wanted to have that similar experience also. Now, participants acquire their firearm through a variety of ways, and there are a variety of mechanisms that participants used. Firearms were acquired as a gift. Some firearms were bought from an associate. Some individuals acquired a firearm after someone in their household had passed away and left the firearm within the household. Other participants may have pooled money to acquire a firearm, and some participants, took the firearm from someone else. Maybe something was left on the porch, and they got access to that firearm, and there was also access to a firearm. Ownership from community guns. Now, participants discussed some situations in which they think it might make sense for them to have someone to have less ready access to firearms. Now, some participants described a number of high-risk situations when someone should not have access to a firearm. And these moments included when someone is under the influence, when someone is potentially having suicidal thoughts, or limiting access to a firearm during an interpersonal conflict, when we know that individual, tensions may arise during the interpersonal conflict, and it would be best for individuals to not have access to a firearm to avoid any irrational decision making during those moments of tension. Some participants mentioned specific locations in which someone should limit their access to a firearm, and these locations included government spaces such as courtrooms, and participants were also aware of or also described specific household members whom they think should not, or they would want to limit access to firearms. And this included ensuring that the firearm access is limited to children so as to avoid any potential unintentional shootings or self-injury or harm that might be caused by leaving the firearm open for the children to access the firearm. Then there were also some storage practices.
Esprene,
Yes.
Esprene, would you hold up 1 second? There's some audio feedback that the audience is hearing. I'm also hearing it. I don't know if are you hearing it? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're all on mute. So I don't know if you want to go on mute, then come off to see if that. Yeah, because we're getting some notes from the audience that the sound is coming in choppy.
What about now?
Still, but let me.
Are you hearing me?
Go on
Still
mute.
choppy. I'm afraid to come back in, but let me try that. See if that's an option.
Okay. All right.
And she came back in. All right, let's see. We got to improve it.
Did we lose Miss Sharon?
Oh, it took Miss Sharon. Hey, audience, give us a second.
Presentation was going so good too.
Sorry about the sound quality.
Yeah, but you can hear me still? That's just the question of the day. Can you hear me?
Can you all hear me now?
Yeah, yes. It's better.
Yeah.
Miss Sharon and Bryant, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just hold right here.
All right, no one move. Don't move, don't do anything. All right, let's see. Share screen. I don't even know what's going on. Okay, here we go. All right. Don't let moms get. All right, everyone. So hopefully my audio is back and you could all hear me clearly. So I'm going to continue on with some other of the research topics and questions that we've asked participants. So the other question that we wanted to that we've asked participants is to really understand the participants' storage practices. And what we found in the data is the storage practices, varied among participants. So some participants stored their firearms in an unloaded and in a specific location in the home where they used a key and a lock to securely store their firearms. Now, many of the participants that we've talked to discussed using unsecure storage practices, which included leaving the firearm loaded and storing the firearm in a very specific location in the home without using a locking device. So, and then other participants spoke about having someone else store their firearm, and it's not very clear on the storage practices that the other person has used. But I'm going to discuss some more about that later on to provide some solutions for storage practices that we're seeing here. So other questions that we've asked included really finding out from participants what are those conditions that really prompt the use of a firearm. And the participants suggested that there were some situations in which they could think of that would prompt the use of a firearm. And that included feeling scared while in an environment and needing that firearm just in case there is a potential home invasion. Other participants talked about feeling unsafe within the neighborhood and also using the firearm for potential retaliation. We asked participants about the frequency with which they took the firearms out of their home, and very few participants did not take firearms out of the home. Other participants, many of whom discussed actually deciding that they would take the firearm out of the home when leaving the home so that they can feel safe and feel a sense of safety. And those firearms were taken possibly into crowded events and spaces such as parties, and even taking the firearm outside of the home when walking around the block just for a short period of time. We were interested in finding out about law enforcement and understanding some more about participants' experiences speaking with law enforcement. And many participants overwhelmingly discussed there was no desire to speak to law enforcement. In fact, participants distrusted the police. Participants did not trust the police to, for example, show up to domestic violence incidents. Participants preferred to handle a domestic situation themselves, or participants also preferred to reach out to a high-risk interventionist instead of law enforcement because of the perception that law enforcement could possibly come in, arrest people, and they were concerned that arrest sometimes was unnecessary, and participants were more had said that they preferred, law enforcement to come in to protect the community instead of coming in to really arrest members within the community. Now, what exactly does all of this mean, and what are the findings suggesting? Now, again, participants, all of this is encapsulated in participants, one participant saying this is just life. And I want to spend some time deconstructing some of the things that we've heard from participants. And one of the key takeaways that we're seeing here is there is a lot of fear that is driving participants from participants' illicit firearm ownership, particularly fear of becoming the next victim of gun violence. There's a fear of experiencing victimization from domestic abuse. And there's that fear of becoming the victim of a random shooting. There's also participants just overwhelmingly just talking about the distrust that have experienced with law enforcement and really preferring to handle those situations themselves and to really rely on the high-risk interventionists or community-based intervention programs who build that trust with the community and chat with community members to understand their needs. And there's some wisdom that we can gather here from recognizing the importance of community violence interruption programs and seeing how some of these models and strategies that community violence interruption programs have implemented can possibly be channeled in the direction of police officers or law enforcement, building that relationship also with community members so that we can work towards not having that distrust continue among participants or within the community. Now, although one interesting finding that was important to note is that although some participants or many participants were aware of those moments when we asked participants those moments in which you should limit access to a firearm, participants were very knowledgeable about how what they should do to well, not what they should do, but whom they should limit firearm access to. We've also seen that although participants were aware of whom they should limit access to firearms to, there was this disconnect between that knowledge and also how participants chose to store their firearms. And some of the firearms were potentially stored in places which could potentially place other members of the household at risk for accidental shootings, firearm injury and death. And it seemed as though participants were somewhat, to some extent, some of the participants were aware of the storage practices, but at the same time, there was this conflict between storing a firearm securely under a lock and a key and still trying to wrestle with the idea of wanting a firearm just in case there's a home invasion, just in case there's someone they might need the firearm in the event of an emergency. So there's a real critical opportunity here for us thinking about the credible messengers that participants even mentioned in the interviews, those high-risk interventionists and individuals whom the participants feel comfortable trusting. There's an opportunity to utilize the credible messengers to really discuss storage, safe or secure storage practices with firearm owners, because the goal here is firearm ownership. When discussing those incidents of safe firearm storage, we want to really move towards that goal of reducing the likelihood of those unintentional deaths to children or even other members who might be might eventually interact with the firearm in the home. The data also suggests that participants were really growing up from a very young age and witnessing and seeing and being exposed to losing a lot of loved ones to gun violence. And even as early as their pre-teenager age and even into their teenager age, just witnessing the gun violence within the community. And this data actually suggests that we really need to pay attention to all of the trauma and the complex trauma that participants are experiencing from such a young age, even witnessing, as we heard earlier in one of the keynote presentations, witnessing gun violence is a form of adverse childhood experiences. And we need to really pay attention to that because it seems as though those adverse, the complex trauma and the pain within the community was actually driving participants to eventually want to protect themselves against other potential harms and threats that might come their way. So the data also suggests that participants were, wrestling with weighing some of the costs and benefits of illicit firearm ownership. And there was a sense that participants were aware of the risk of possessing an illicit firearm. And at the same time, the message was very clear that participants preferred to possess a firearm and to use that firearm to protect themselves and loved ones. And it was very clear that participants were choosing to possess a firearm so that they can have that firearm in moments when they needed to protect themselves or their families. So overall, again, what this says is that essentially the findings are indicating that there's really a broad picture of life of an illicit firearm owner, and there are some complex realities that we need to be attuned to as we think about the firearm ownership among the illicit firearm owners. And there's some upstream measures that we can use and we can employ to implement prevention efforts as we pay attention to the complex realities of illicit firearm owners, with the goal of working towards reducing firearm injury and death within communities. All right, so now I'm going to just pause here so that we can open up the room for our moderator to come in, and we can have hopefully a meaningful discussion as we just chat about the findings and even chat about our collaboration with NCST. Oops, there we go. I can hear you.
Okay. Bryant, can you hear me? Ms. Sharon?
Yes, we
Yes, we hear.
Okay, that's great. Esprene, Ms. Sharon, Bryant, extremely great work. This is an awesome project, one that we've been very excited about. So today, we're very happy to have you with us. So Ms. Sharon and Bryant, I know Ms. Sharon, you're a community activist. I think you have 50 plus years on the ground in Newark, and Bryant, you're a high-risk interventionist. Can you talk a little bit about your role with NCST and what those two titles mean?
Well, I'm a community activist. I started with NCST in 2016. I was a preschool teacher for 25 years. And the gun violence and the violence in my neighborhood, I'm from the South Ward in the city of Newark, it affected me, my family, my neighbors, the children that I taught. And it just made me want to just really do something in my community. And then with my my nephews getting killed, and then my own son also getting shot, it just really put it into me to really, help to try to ease the gun violence that's going on here in our city. And when I was asked to do the study, it was just an opportunity for me to learn more about illegal gun use, illicit gun use in our city, or why we have guns and everything.
Yeah.
Right.
Brian, what does a high-risk interventionist do?
A high-risk interventionist is people from different neighborhoods that came up, like was kind of like on the bad side, committing crimes, going to jail. And what we do is we engage with the community by like if it's a beef or like a drama, we'll bring people together to come to a peaceful outcome. Provide them with other resources that NCST has, such as TRC. When people are victims of violence, they get VCCL, that's victims compensation. Yeah, that's pretty much what we do. Violence interrupters.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about your roles on the project, because I think they're very interesting and are deeply connected. Bryant, you were responsible for identifying participants, correct?
Yes.
How difficult or hard was that for you to identify participants for the project? How did you get them to trust you enough to come in and talk about their illicit firearm ownership?
Well, most of the people I got to come, I know them, so they had my trust, and it was an understanding that it was confidential. A lot of people didn't want to do it because they thought that their business was like going to get out there, they was going to have to use their name. But once I told them it was confidential, they were okay with it.
Wow, that's powerful. Esprene, were you trying to raise your hand and get in?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I thought you, yeah.
Thurman, I am actually.
Okay, get in.
Bryant is like a very understated person, and
Yeah.
I just want to say is that there is no way that people would have participated in this study without Bryant and other people on the team building their trust, right? Like, absolutely. When we first talked about it, people were terrified. They thought it was a setup. And that is just that speaks to the credibility that Bryant and his colleagues on the high risk intervention team have in the community, that they were able. This is probably the most personal topic people could ever discuss on the record. And he and Miss Sharon were able to get people to actually speak to really the most personal thing in the world.
When we met with NCST to brainstorm about projects, this was at the bottom of our list of projects to raise just because of how sensitive the topic was. And this ended up being the one that I think Akila and others, Brother Damon and Ray, were very excited about doing. And they thought they could do it relatively easily, which I thought was surprising because of people like Bryant. Ms. Sharon, I know you've been close to exploding for a little bit over 10 days. Just excited to talk about all your hard work on this project. So you want to talk a little bit about your role on this project?
Yes. My role on this project too was really recruiting people, to really talk to us about, having illegal guns. And I just want everybody to know it's not that easy to come and talk about your personal business, especially when you have an illicit gun. So they had to really trust me and Brian to talk about the questions that we wanted to ask them, that were really personal and stuff. And asking the questions and everything, just having that trust, because even when we had Ray, who did the audio for us, every of the participants would come in and be like, "Who's that?
Right.
Who's that, Miss Sharon? We supposed to be just talking." So it really factored on trust, because the questions that we asked and stuff really got really deep sometimes. And one of the good things that I was happy to do this project along with Bryant, that some of the questions that when we went over them, some of them we felt weren't, really trauma informed for some of the people and stuff. So it would be traumatized. And so we were able to, some of the questions we didn't use. Now, thank you, Esprene, for that, and Thurman. And some of the questions we were able to turn around and stuff to make them more trauma, informed for that person and stuff, so they wouldn't feel so traumatized and stuff. And, me and Brian took the training. I think the CITI training, we did it for almost 2 weeks and everything. So we're certified researchers. We had to understand everything that we had to do. Everything had to be confident, confidentiality we had to have for everybody. And that, this project was really, really deep, talking about, a lot of personal issues that a lot of people had to deal with, having an illicit gun, because we dealt with so many participants that had been locked, had already been incarcerated, and had been through going their own trauma and stuff. And some that had family members that were killed that weren't feeling safe and everything. And just, the point of not even feeling safe in your own home or not going out or just trying to go to work. It was just really, really, really deep. And the most important part for me is that a lot of times after me and Brian would do the interviews with everybody, with the participants, it was the talks afterwards that really, really, really got really, really deep into a lot of things we were talking about. And it was really emotional.
Wow.
Yeah, one of the things I want to just add here, with the entire approach of the community-based participant approach that we utilize, and thanks, Ms. Sharon, for raising that, is the fact that the interview guide, the community partners, we took the interview guide to the community partners during the training session, and collectively we spent time reviewing those questions. We opened up the opportunity for our community partner to say if questions needed to be revised, as Ms. Sharon said, and the key here is that we listened to the voices of the community and ensured that we tweaked those questions so that it was suitable, and some language was not necessarily language that we should use when working with community members. So it was quite an interesting and an experience that I want to uplift to demonstrate the importance of validating community members and acknowledging their voices in the room as we're working towards collecting, talking with participants and shaping this study. So I just really wanted to mention that and echo exactly what Ms. Sharon mentioned.
All right, we do have a question from the audience. I think I'll take this one. I can share a little bit about another partnership between us and NCST. So Karen Cantor asks, were the participants open to hearing about safe storage? Were they open to using the resources that NCST offered? I don't know if during this project you all had any conversations about safe storage. So I'll let Brian or Ms. Sharon say something about that if that was the case. If not, I have something to say about that.
I did. When one of the participants was talking about the safe storage or what they did as far as putting their firearm up, they had children, and where they said they had people put it at, they said that they didn't think their child had saw where they put it at and stuff. And I just kind of raised the question, I'm saying, well, you sure that your child didn't see it in anything? And, it just made them think afterwards. They said, Ms. Sharon, I'm going to look into trying to find a gun storage case to put this firearm in, because, just raising the point about, I was just saying, we have to watch our children because they see everything that we do and stuff. And I said, you might not think your child is looking at you, but they see everything. I said, they see everything that we do. And it wasn't, I think they were a lot of people, participants, more concerned about them knowing where it was at and understanding that it would be ready when they needed it and stuff. And also, Thurman, I just wanted to bring up another point.
Sure.
I'm just going to go back. On the study, so many of the participants said to me and Brian that once we did the study and we asked the questions and everything, it was just brought up to it. It came up so much that really stuck out to me. They said, no one ever asked me how I felt about having an illegal gun. And it was something like they really wanted to get off their chest because they never really talked about it with anyone or talked about their experiences on why they had it. And I think it changed a lot of people's perception on a lot of, different reasons why they have it and stuff. It really made them think about why they had it and everything. And some of the questions just really made them think and stuff. And they really just said, thank you to us afterwards. Thank you, because nobody ever asked us that part. It was like they were like just having, this firearm in their home or when they used it, but nobody ever asked them why they would have it on them and stuff. And so a lot of them, it was an important question because it was like they had it, and some of them, knew they weren't supposed to have it, but they said no one tried to ever figure out why they always wanted to have that firearm on how they felt about it. So that was one thing that stuck out to me, because a lot of people just think a lot of different things, and how it's stigmatized, especially here in the city of Newark, on how we have firearms. And with our gun laws, also that stuck out too. A lot of the participants knew about the gun laws, but how many stigmatization that we have about getting a gun, even one legally. You know, one of the big red flags, of course, was if you have a record, or you are incarcerated, or have other little different issues that, you know, might arise and stuff. And it was a couple of people that really would want to do it the right way, but they just knew that they had, you know, that they wouldn't be able to get it and stuff. So the main thing out of everything, that most of the participants just want to feel safe, just like everybody on this call, everybody that I'm talking to now, just wanting to be safe. And we are no different than us down here in Newark and out there in Idaho or wherever they have the open carry. We just want to feel safe,
right,
for our family, for ourselves. All right, it is a population out here, just like in every city, a small population that does crime and stuff and use illegal guns for different reasons. But just from this one study, even though it was only 35 people, it made a big impact that everybody just wanted to feel safe.
Yeah. I just want to add to Karen Cantor's question about safe storage. The GVRC is purchasing a number of gun locks, trigger locks, and biometric safes, and we're partnering with our community partners to distribute those secure storage devices in the community. It's not a project. We're not trying to get information or data from anybody, any names. We're just giving people methods, ways to store their firearm safely, secure storage. I've got to get used to the
I know. If I could jump in here, that was the exact distinction I was going to make as Ms. Sharon was talking and discussing the what she noticed with participants, discussing, well, my firearm is stored safely. You know, it's probably up in a ceiling or somewhere within my household where a child cannot have access to the firearm. And one of the things that we want to do, even with the project that Thurman is mentioning, is really making a distinction between storing a firearm safely and storing a firearm securely. And really storing that firearm securely means, you know, using possibly cable locks, which are sometimes the least effective, but it's still important to at least have a measure or a method for secure firearm storage. There's also the biometric locks that I believe that I believe that's what we're going to distribute, right, to the community. And really having Ms. Sharon and NCST identify those credible messengers who can have those interactions with folks from the community to really discuss how to securely store their firearm. I believe Ms. Sharon and other Bryant and maybe some other members from the NCST team will be trained on how to securely, you know, demonstrate to other participants how to securely store the firearms. And I really love the fact that Ms. Sharon mentioned about folks sometimes think about make this distinction between illicit firearm owners and then legal firearm ownership, and the broad message here is that firearm ownership, you know, presents or increases the likelihood of firearm injury or death across the U.S., regardless of if it is illicit or legal firearm ownership. So I hope the takeaway here that we leave, the message that we leave with, is how can we collectively work on not alienating and criminalizing Black and Brown communities, and working towards actually looking to move forward, collectively have discussions on how to prevent firearm injury and death across the U.S.
Yeah. So I didn't know if you wanted to say something about your reduction philosophy, your harm reduction philosophy.
Oh, no. Well, I just, you know, we are at our heart a harm reduction organization, right? And we understand why people own illicit weapons, and we can make sure they're safe.
Well, let me.
Oh, I think Bryant and Ms. Sharon, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Saying we do harm reduction in all our work, whether it's our overdose response team or our high risk intervention team. And we understand that, people own illicit firearms for very real reasons. They don't feel safe and they want to feel safe. And so rather than getting involved in that choice, we just want to make sure that their children and their families in the community are safer by giving them the lock. So we're really, really excited about adding this to our suite of services. So thank you, Thurman and the Rutgers Gun Violence Research Center.
So yeah, I thought as a group, everybody, Ms. Sharon included, and Esprene can talk about why more of these partnerships don't happen, right? Like, why isn't this just the normal course, right? When you're trying to do research in Black and Brown communities. And I'll say on the research side of the house, what I've heard often is that community-based organizations like NCST and others don't like research, right? They're against data-driven policies, right? And we know that's not true, right? We just finished a project together. So why are some community-based organizations reluctant, right, to work with researchers?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and first of all, I'm E. I'm the policy director for Newark Community Street Community. Bryant, I think you and Ms. Sharon, you need to mute. Thanks. And it was part of the founding team of NCST. And as soon as we launched, and people in 2014 and folks realized that we had access to people that nobody else has access to, right? We are like a treasure trove of great research opportunities. We, like many community-based organizations, were kind of bombarded by requests for research requests. And honestly, some of them weren't requests, Thurman. There were people who just showed up and would enroll people, our team, in focus groups and different studies without even consulting us. And they were almost without exception engaged in exploitative practices. We actually had a researcher who got our team to recruit for a research project without telling them what they were doing. And again, we realized what was going on and shut it down. So this is why these kind of practices are why often community-based organizations are not willing to participate. The other piece of it is that often researchers come in, they harvest a bunch of data, they advance their careers, maybe they get tenure, they get published, and then they leave and the community is left with nothing to benefit them. So we were willing, and NCST, we have our own IRB, and we are very, very selective. We will not support any exploitative practices. And so when y'all came to us, there was none of that. As Akila said before I got on the call, he said they weren't expert, they weren't know-it-alls, they weren't experts. You came in, you consulted us. What would be a benefit to the team and to the community? What kind of understandings did we want to get out of the project, right? It wasn't just about y'all and what you all wanted out of it. And then how our folks were trained. Brian and Ms. Sharon are going to be, their names are going to be published, which was of the greatest importance to us. We want our team to be recognized for their expertise. And another thing you experience with researchers, that they're like too busy to focus on sort of like working with us. Y'all always had time. You showed up with integrity, and recognize that research is not our day job, right? We have day jobs. Bryant is a high risk interventionist, and we're willing to support us through the process. So it was just a completely different, really community based process. And always grateful to you and Esprene, and then also willing to do the follow-up, which is the other thing, like recognizing, okay, community needs safe storage. So, okay, how can we bring that in after the research project is done? So just so many different approaches that allowed us to participate in this project.
And can I just add the value of compensating our community partners? I know E can probably have an entire dialogue about this, but it was important for us to to recognize the knowledge and the resources that the community members brought to the table. And it was no better than the knowledge. I mean, the knowledge coming from a higher academic institution is not better than the knowledge coming from community members who are doing this hard work in the community every day, working with the community members, building relationships. So we wanted to actually acknowledge that wealth of wisdom by compensating our community partners in initial upfront conversations about, what would this cost the community partners administratively and otherwise to really come on board to facilitate this project, so that we don't necessarily conduct this project. Some folks call it for white enlightenment, but really to conduct this project so we can work together and really understand the lived experiences of illicit firearm owners, so that we can move towards providing some more programs and addressing some of the concerns that the illicit firearm owners have shared within the interviews.
When you said compensation, I knew you weren't talking about those digital gift cards you ordered.
Yeah, that was very interesting, and that's very important.
Yeah, okay, yeah, highlight that. I think it's a good thing to talk about the function. Go ahead, Esprene.
Yeah, no. Thanks for raising that. Really thinking about the mechanisms that we're using to compensate participants, virtual versus hard copy gift cards, thinking about some of the barriers to accessing maybe computers and all that to get an electronic gift card. All of that might seem very fundamental, but it was important even throughout the conversations and our relationships with community partners to discuss some of these barriers and course correct. And learn with the community partners, how can we facilitate something that is not a partnership that is not burdensome to any of the community members, because community members have real lives, real expenses, and we wanted to ensure that they were not only compensated for their time, but ensuring that the compensation was not, as I said before, wasn't a burdensome pathway to get that compensation.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a good thing to highlight too, because we don't always get it right? But we're willing to be flexible and nimble enough to listen to our community partners to try to make the relationship better, to respond. And those digital gift cards, well, we didn't know you had to enter some personal information, somewhere. We just thought it was super convenient, because everybody has a cell phone. You just travel with it digitally. But in order to access it, you had to input, I don't know if it was a phone number or a last name, you had to provide some personal information. And when you're having a sensitive conversation like illicit firearm ownership, people think it's a scam. And so it went to our credibility. And so we end up having to correct that, which is a good thing. I want to go back a little bit to really the capacity building element that you mentioned, because in our early conversations with NCST, you all were really clear about what you wanted to accomplish through this project for the staff and the organization as a whole. So the staff being trained as researchers, the analyzing the data, to interviewing folks, to being authors on the manuscript, and also the being compensated. Why is all that important to NCST? Why does that matter so much? Why does it matter that Ms. Sharon and Bryant and they have their names on the manuscript? What does that mean?
Oh man, I mean, it's at the heart of what we are as an organization, right? And we believe that you make a community safer by investing in the people and the organizations within that community, right? And so we want Bryant and Ms. Sharon to be able to be researchers on other projects, right? I would be, as much as they are essential members of our team, like if someone wanted to swoop in and offer them huge, bigger jobs. Like we want everyone in our organization to grow, to develop, and to thrive. And so we can't participate in any projects that don't allow people that opportunity. So it was essential to us that this project invest in the professional development and personal development of people on our team. And we did actually put other people through the CITI training at the same time that Rutgers paid for. because we just want people to build people's skills. And that's, for folks who don't know, most of our team are previously incarcerated, and they have been kind of systematically cut off from opportunities throughout their lives. And so that's what we do all day, every day, is try to fight for our people to have, just to have more opportunities. And then for our organization, I mean, we are very much a grassroots organization, and we have a building and a beautiful house in the South Ward, but it requires a lot of maintenance. So we need, we got to keep the lights on. So we had to build things like that into the grant as best we can. And of course, Thurman, the overhead expenses were a little low on the grant, but we appreciated that at least there was something in there.
We can always adjust. It's a real partnership, and I think that's a good point. We don't always get it right? You start out, and then things change. So we should have a conversation about that. And I remember you reaching out. I think someone forgot to record some portion of information for some group of people. And it requires additional budget, right? We're in a situation to be able to do it. It was an accident, right? So we have to remain flexible in these types of relationships. But research, you have to be flexible at all times. I'm learning, even if it's not a community-based research project, the project, so many that we start out with the expectation that it's going to look like this, is going to be this thing. By the time you finish, it's something else, right? Just have to be flexible.
Yeah, and that's partnership, right? Is recognizing that we show up with we're human beings, and we make mistakes. But and I just want to, Ms. Sharon and Bryant, they put their heart and soul into this project. They were professionals. They were so amazing at this work. And and so that's what you were asking about, being published and being recognized. And I'm going to shut up because I want them to talk, because we want the world to know that Bryant and Sharon are superstar researchers.
Yes, I agree. We want the world to know that too. Ms. Sharon, you were saying something earlier about you conducted the interview, but a lot of times you end up having a second unscheduled conversation right after the interview, that the participants came in and they just wanted to talk about their lived experience. Can you share a little bit about what happened in those additional conversations after the formal interview?
Yes. Especially when you talk about losing a loved one, or if you had been shot before. And I think the one that really stood out to me was the participants that were incarcerated on a gun charge, and they lost a loved one while they were incarcerated through gun violence, and they weren't able to come home to attend the funeral. And it just really took me, it's emotional for me, because the look in the participants' eyes when they talked about it, it was like that same look. And my heart just went out to them, because they understood that they had were incarcerated because they had, were there because of a gun offense. And then to lose a loved one while being, incarcerated to gun violence and stuff, it really took a lot out of that person and stuff. And, just talking about dealing with the gun violence period, a lot of them, it got emotional afterwards. It was some tears, maybe one or two times we had to stop.
Oh.
And it just, when you're telling your truth, telling your truth and just feeling that comfortable to really tell your truth and to, stay and talk afterwards, it really made a big difference and stuff. And like I said, for some of the participants, it was the first time that they ever talked about it. And they talked about even, having a firearm or using it, or even having one, in their possession at home and stuff. So it was really, really emotional, a real emotional experience. And then the other one I just want to talk about was one of the participants. He got his illicit firearm because he was bullied. he was a young man that had dreads, and he was big for, you know, the age that he was. And he was always being like bullied by different people in the community and always by law enforcement. And it was really like also did, you know, like kind of broke my heart that somebody had to walk around just to feel safe. And that person was never like a threat, but just because you had dreads and you were a young black man walking in Newark, that everybody always thought of you as a threat. And, you know, it just, a lot of the participants, a lot of the stories and stuff that they told, me and Bryant could identify with a lot of it because we lived a lot of the stuff that they were talking about, you know, from day to day. So that's why it was so important for, but really for me to really understand, you know, more about why, you know, people would have an illicit gun. And it's just the thing that it doesn't just do to that person, but it really affects your family and it affects your community. Just because you want to feel safe, that's what just sticks out to me out of everything. Just wanting to feel safe. I can't imagine myself every time I want to leave my house just to walk to the corner store, that I have to take a gun with me so I can feel safe.
Yeah.
And you know, it just, you know, people just really telling their stories and stuff and really just, you know, pouring their hearts out, but just feeling that confidence they could talk about it and stuff. And, you know, and like I said, that just really just stuck out to me, that just wanted to be safe no matter what we were doing and stuff. And the stigma, how we are stigmatized as just being gangbangers and robbers and, you know, we don't care about nothing down here. But the thing that really just like drew me, opened my eyes, is just people just want to feel safe, just like I was. And that almost everybody that we interviewed did not feel that law enforcement they would be safe with law enforcement. Or the agency that's supposed to protect and serve us. But we feel that you have to have your own firearm to protect yourself, because that's how much confidence that we had that nobody felt safe. And that was also a kind of a trigger for a lot of the participants, because you could just see the how would I say it, the emotion rise up. And when you ask how you feel about law enforcement, Bryant.
Yeah, I learned a few myths while doing this study. Like people are not out here using their firearms for visual threats or to intimidate others. They have them just like strictly to protect themselves, to protect their family. Having firearms put children at risk. Yeah, it could, but most of the people that I interviewed, they said that that's when they have less ready access to their firearm. Like people, yeah, just like what Sharon said, people just want to feel safe. Even when it comes to history, minorities haven't felt safe for about 200 years. You go way back to, you know, slavery and all that, all the stuff that was happening to us. I feel like just because you're convicted felon, you should still be able to like protect your family. Like it should be some type of test, psychological test you take to figure out if you like in your right state of mind, you have any mental illnesses, to give you a chance to get a firearm just to protect your family. Like you got all this innocent bystanders getting killed, like little kids, all these mass shootings. Yeah.
Esprene, were you also surprised by that finding, that it seemed like most of the people, the primary reason for their firearm ownership was protection?
It wasn't.
Good. Now I was going to say, when we started out having conversations about this project, I don't think I thought that would be the primary reason. And what I find interesting is that I know Akila always tied it to public safety. Always, like this public safety, like people own and carry because they feel unsafe. And I don't know why I didn't transition and just pick up on that as a belief right? That the project may bear that out, improve it, but it's just really interesting that the reason for gun ownership seems to be very similar, regardless of if the gun is illicitly owned or legally owned.
Yeah, if I could add, it comes back to this, like what folks call like making a distinction between master narratives, where we live in a world where we consume particular narratives about Black and Brown communities being potentially criminals and potentially wanting illicit firearms because, you know, they have, there's violence within their community and everyone is killing everyone within. So we consume those master narratives, and those master narratives kind of replicate themselves and reproduce harm within conversations and within communities. And it's important to take a step back and really engage in reflexivity and engage in ways in which those master narratives that we consume impact the way that we think about Black and Brown communities, and really take a step back and contextualize the issue and think about all the other structural disadvantages that are within the communities of colors that have started from way back in the 1900s or before. Those structural inequalities and inequities and social determinants of health are some things that we need to also collectively think about when we're addressing illicit firearm ownership, and pay attention to that, and not just singularly blame individuals for what's happening within their community, but really taking a step back and focusing on those inequities. I think we lost Thurman, did we?
Yeah, he had to go to the main stage. And, you know, I just want to say there are like so people feel safe. I want to feel safe, right? But also there are real implications to owning an illicit firearm, right? It's a parole violation, a probation violation. If you're caught, if you have an illicit gun on you and you are a victim of violence, you're going to almost inevitably get disqualified for victims compensation and not be able to get any benefits. And so you're at there, and then there's other consequences, right? And you're asking people to choose between feeling unsafe, which is what they communicated in their research, or, you know, facing these really, really horrible consequences for being caught with an illicit weapon. And I just said it's a horrible choice to make people make, and a horrible dilemma. So I really appreciate having this additional context, because so often Black people in particular are criminalized for their ownership of guns, and they're often just trying to meet a basic human need, which is to keep themselves and their families feeling safe.
Yep, which is no different from the rest of the population. All right, everyone. So I'm not too sure about time, but I think we're going to eventually be returning back to the main stage. So thank you very much all for your time, and we have 3 minutes. You see, thanks GVRC organizing team. So any final words? Let's do that within the 3 minutes that we have. Any final words from Ms. Sharon or Bryant? Any message? Any final words from you?
Yes, I think we should have more projects like this, like on different topics. Like one of the topics I would like to research is the stolen cars. I would like to speak to the youth to find out what is it about the cars that they're so into it. That's like a big problem in the city right now.
And I would like to also do a project on, and I know we have to have parental consent, but I'm also interested in how the youth feel about illicit guns too, because it's like sometimes it's generational, and you know, from my study we see how they really attain guns and stuff, but I think it's important that we understand why they are using them and getting them too, and how we can maybe prevent them from, you know, not getting them, but having them understand why, you know, they would need, you know, understand why they would need to have illicit gun too.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm assuming any final words as we close out?
Yeah, sure. Just I hope this presentation inspired people to really understand that an authentic partnership with a community-based organization that's rooted in equity, in respect, and dignity can really generate exciting results. And so I hope that if there are like new researchers on this call, or other community-based organizations, that they really understand, like, you don't have to be exploited. You can partner on a project that will benefit both you and the researchers and society at large. So thank you so much to Esprene, to you and Thurman and the whole team for embarking on this project with us. We really appreciate it.
All right, thank you everyone for your time. Let's remember fair and equitable practices as we engage in research practices. All right, thank you everyone, and I'll see you all in the main stage.